You're listening to the Wired for Impact podcast. I'm here once again with Molly Elmore. Molly, welcome to the call.
Hey, Peter, how are you? Good to see you again.
I'm doing fantastic. Welcome back to the podcast. Congratulations are in order. Since the last time I had you on, you've kind of blown up in this whole space, which has been really fun to watch. I am, full disclosure, I'm a member of your Two Steps Ahead subscription. Locals group, which is a fantastic resource for anyone that's interested. We'll give more information about that at the end of the call. But yeah, it's been really fun to see your channels grow and your involvement in all the crypto space. And specifically what we're going to be talking about today is your involvement and passion around the XRP project and all the excitement around that. So again, congratulations on all your success, your recent success. It's been awesome.
Thank you very much. It's been a whirlwind. It certainly has not been a dull moment at all in the last at least 6 months. Yeah.
Well, the people that you've had on your podcast on your programs have been people that have now been added to my circle of interest and that I follow. I can't remember if I saw Black Swan Capitalist through you or not, but I love what those guys are doing and what they're putting out. Fascinating content. Jimmy Valley, of course, that interview was fantastic and the stuff that he's been doing. But before we get too nerdy on all of this, I still want to talk to people who aren't as familiar with all this project and what the opportunity is. It's funny because for somebody like you, it's like, I think about XRP almost every day. I'm looking at charts. I'm hearing news. I'm excited about the future. And then I have to remember that most people, XRP is what the heck are you talking about? Isn't crypto dead? I thought crypto was a scam. What's going on? So what is XRP? Why does it exist? Why is it valuable? Why is there so much excitement around that? We'll start with that just to give a broad overview, and then we can kind of dive in.
Sure. So the way I found XRP is about a year and a half ago. I had an education crypto program teaching women how to invest. And I went through all the major blockchains in order: Bitcoin, Ethereum, blah, blah, blah. And XRP was in the sort of like top 5, but all the people that were talking about crypto that I was listening to never mentioned it. So I actually passed over it initially because I was recommended to focus on some of these other ones like Avalanche, Phantom, all that stuff. But then I kept sort of saying, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well go through the whole list. And I started to research XRP. And almost immediately, I found 2 very strange things. One was this scandal called ETH Gate, which I was like, wow, this is juicy. And then kind of related to that was this thing called the XRP Buyback proposal. And I was like, what is these 2 things are nothing like any of the other blockchains that I have gone through. And so my curiosity was completely engrossed in what is ETH Gate and what does it have to do with this XRP buyback? Who's going to buy that? Someone's going to buy my XRP. And it sort of started this very, very long rabbit hole journey. So XRP is a layer 1 blockchain, just like Ethereum or Bitcoin, in that it is kind of a base layer. And it was created, according to the founders, to be a better Bitcoin. That Bitcoin is a very revolutionary way to send money from one person to another. There is no counterparty risk in the same way that there is with like a Federal Reserve IOU fiat money. But Bitcoin has a couple of drawbacks, namely that it's expensive to send money. So if I was a company and had 10,000 employees, to pay them all via Bitcoin would rack up some pretty hefty fees. It's also pretty slow. Like if I'm standing in your store to pay you and you don't let me leave with the stuff until I've given you the money, and it takes like 10 minutes for that transaction to go through, it's kind of an awkward situation. So XRP solves some of the problems around speed and cost so that it could be a more viable payments method for the global marketplace.
And now, real quick, the reason for that is just the technology underneath it, correct? So because again, most people are thinking of crypto assets as sort of one and all the same. And so can you explain a little bit of why it's so much faster?
Sure.
Versus
the way blockchain works is they're accounting ledgers, kind of databases around accounting transactions, credits and debits that exist on a series of computers. Now, for Bitcoin, what they do is they have many, many copies that all exist on tons of computers, and all those copies have to like match up. And that's this process of validating. There's also this process in Bitcoin where new tokens are mined when the blockchain is updated. And that is how new tokens are created. And that process for Bitcoin specifically requires a lot of energy, and it takes time for this updating and validating of the ledger to happen. So it takes a while. XRP All of the XRP that will ever be created has been created. The total cap is 100 billion. So there's no mining of XRP. And they chose a consensus protocol called kind of the Byzantine, it's related to the Byzantine generals problem. It's just a more resource efficient way to get consensus that these transactions are accurate. So it happens faster, and because there's no mining, there's no incentive to be a validator. You're just kind of doing it to support the network. So there isn't you're not paying miners to do anything.
Okay, makes sense. And so why so much excitement around the project? I mean, you and I have been living, breathing this for a while, but for those that are still sort of catching up to speed, why is this one different than some of the other projects? Why so much excitement?
The great irony for me with XRP was that I kind of got into this whole world as sort of an anti-banking thing. Like I read Creature from Jekyll Island, found about the incredible corruption with central banks and the sort of scam of fiat. And crypto seems to be like an alternative to that, like a way out of this sort of fiat prison of sorts, this sort of slavery system, right? And then you kind of come across Ripple, and Ripple is a company that is building software on the XRP ledger. And they wanted to figure out, how can we get our software adopted? Well, who moves money most? Who's the most likely type of entity that would pay us to use our service? And the answer was banks. So Ripple looks like at surface level, like they're sort of part of this banking establishment. And so if you get into crypto to be anti-banking and then you get into XRP, it creates this sort of conflict of like, wait a minute, which team am I on here? Yeah. But through that process, in my effort to try to figure out, like, is Ripple a good guy here or is Ripple a bad guy here? I've uncovered that there is an entire new financial system that has been built and is planned for us. It will rely on money that lives on the blockchain called digital assets. I actually don't really like the word crypto anymore because it got this kind of connotation of sort of scammy, get rich quick stuff. So all of the money that I'm referring to, we call them digital assets. They will live on the blockchain, and the way we send money back and forth will change. It will become much faster. It will enable lots of new business models. And Ripple, the company, is kind of pioneering or pushing for the adoption of this particular blockchain, this layer one, to be used to start with banks, and then it will hit businesses, and then it will hit all sorts of use cases peer-to-peer as well. I think
this whole story, this whole XRP / Ripple / what we're going to get into here in a second with the SEC is such a fascinating drama. If you're just sitting on the sidelines watching this is going to make incredible movies in the future, because so much is going on right now that the average person is just not in tune with. And I'm like, man, you guys are missing an incredible show right now. It's absolutely, and what's hanging in the balance is monumental. And so I'm wanting to inject a little excitement into this and some energy into this whole space for my listeners so that they can get more on board with the potential opportunities here. And who knows, maybe it all goes away. Obviously, anything crypto / digital assets, you just don't know. But so give us a little bit of perspective into the controversy. Why is there so much controversy? And explain what's going on with the SEC, which that there's a whole podcast we could probably do on that alone, to be honest.
Sure. So let's talk about ETH Gate. That is, I think, the heart of the controversy, the heart of this SEC lawsuit. And I think there will be a movie made of it. I actually have plans, they're not quite underway yet, to write a book about ETH Gate. Okay. Because it is, I think, the Watergate / Kennedy assassination of our lifetime. And I'll just kind of give you a nutshell about what happened. Is that there's a lot of problems with the current financial system. It takes a lot of money to store money and move money globally. There's a lot of inefficiency. And when blockchain technology first came out, it was pretty clear that this could be the answer. But banks are very slow to move. They need trust. They're not an innovative industry at all. So here's how I kind of see it had it happen. And I'm going to just summarize it. Ripple, as a smart startup fintech company in California, comes up with this idea to revolutionize cross-border payments, how money is moved from one country to another. But they know that they need the bank's buy-in. So they go to JP Morgan and they say, hey, we got this idea. We want to create this service. Will you be our client? And JP Morgan's like, well, and there's some assumptions here on my part. JP Morgan's like, well, we would, but the way this works is that we have to own half of you, or a significant portion. Like, if you want to play in our little banking cartel, then we get to own you. And it seemed like maybe Ripple said no to all of it, or they just couldn't agree on how much. So Ripple was kind of like, no, thanks. We will find another way. And JP Morgan, in essence, was like, yeah, that's not cool. And so they created a rival product, which is Ethereum, and they invested heavily in ETH. There's a lot of covert activity around how ETH was funded, kind of through this company called Consensus. And they had what's called an ICO, like similar to an IPO with stocks, but they launched all these ICO tokens on the ETH network with a great many disguised whales, anonymous accounts that were able to buy in. And what it looks like from the external level is that JP Morgan, because they couldn't get in on the XRP Ripple situation, invested heavily in a rival to try to beat XRP. And they needed some time. So they had the SEC sue Ripple and drag out this lawsuit for 2 years so that their product could have a shot at capturing the market. It hasn't worked. ETH has some really great qualities to it, but it's very expensive. It's quite slow. It's not really suitable for cross-border payments. That's why all these layer twos like Polygon and Arbitrum have been built, but they're not as good as a layer one that is fast and efficient. So that is sort of the theory behind ETH Gate, is that the banking cartel, because they couldn't get a large enough piece of Ripple, had their boys sue Ripple. And this guy named Jay Clayton was the head of the SEC, and he did it on his last day at work before he left the job, files this lawsuit, walks out. And then there was sort of this very vague period where there was nobody really in charge. It was an interim person who kind of changed some of the rules that made no sense. And people who, and I'm not a securities lawyer or know anything about that, but people who are in that space, like Jimmy, they were like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. There's a lot of things that are just totally illogical about this lawsuit, that there's something more to this story because this doesn't make sense. And generally when the SEC sues people, they want a quick win so they can go brag about it and take the money and show how good they are at protecting people from these terrible investing opportunities. Right. And so the fact that they've been dragging this case out seems kind of counterintuitive. Like if you have a really good case, like you want to push for it to be a win, and they have stalled at a lot of opportunities.
And for those paying attention, the stall, like you said, it's like shenanigans. I mean, I'm not an expert in this whole thing, but the headlines that I'm seeing, the articles and the little podcast clips that I'm seeing here and there, it just sounds like the SEC is it's part. I mean, in theory, the SEC exists to provide protection, to provide regulations around securities, i.e. stocks for companies, so that people don't do shady stuff. But one of the crux of the controversies around this is that whether or not XRP, the digital asset, is a security that the SEC can even regulate in the first place. And that's that in and of itself kind of falls apart.
Is a thing can't be a security. Even if you go back to the Howey test from the 1930s, the 1940s, oranges were not the security, and neither were the orange groves. If you're not familiar with the Howey test, this was a lawsuit back in 1944, 55, where an orange grove owner sold shares in his orange grove to people to raise money so that he could grow more oranges, and then people would get a cut of the profits. The security was the investment contract, the agreement. If you buy my orange trees, you will be a part owner of this business, and then I will share the profits with you. With something like XRP, like there's no investment contract. Like it's a digital asset, it's software code that lives on the blockchain. What am I agreeing to get if I buy it? I could hope that I get profits, but there is no agreement. So the idea that some people assume is that, well, Ripple owns a lot of this XRP, so you're by default signing an agreement with them. That's actually not true. You can buy private equity with Ripple on Link2 and actually buy shares in the company that have nothing to do with XRP. There are other businesses and other projects that have built on the XRP ledger that have nothing to do with Ripple. People also have bought XRP tokens without ever having heard of Ripple. And Ripple could go out of business tomorrow. They're just a company, right?
Well, and XRP pre-existed Ripple. XRP as a digital asset existed even before the company was around.
There's a commonality in that the people who created the XRP ledger now most of them went to start Ripple. So it was called OpenCoin. There was a different company before. There was other people involved. And those founders gifted all this XRP to Ripple when the company was started. So there is like a connection there, but Ripple, the company, did not issue XRP. And generally, when you are like if you have a stock in your company that is a security, you are, as the company issue that stock, you are the issuer of it. And that is not the case with Ripple and XRP. So there's also, the SEC is also alleging that secondary sales of XRP are securities, which means I go to Coinbase or whatever, to Binance, and I buy some XRP. And then, Peter, I sell it to you. And if you were to buy that for me, according to what the SEC says, that's a security transaction where I have no say in the profits of XRP or Ripple. And this agreement between us, if I'm using it as a payment currency to pay you for something, is the investment contract around? Like, neither of us are in any way tied to the success of the XRP ledger as a whole. So there's a lot of things that just don't add up. And it's an incredibly significant case for crypto and the blockchain, because if Ripple loses, it's going to create a lot of problems for a lot of other crypto assets, specifically ETH and many, many other ones that have use cases that are utility and potentially store of value. Ripple wins, it will be the only digital asset with clarity in the court system that it is not a security. So even if you're not interested in XRP and Ripple, which you should be if you ever spend money anywhere, the industry is we're waiting at the edge of our seats. And the industry too, I mean, I interact with a lot of people in this community now. Like, stress is high. Like, this case has been just dragging on for a very long time. And I haven't even been in it for the full 2 years that so many very patient, dedicated XRP hodlers have been. And we're ready for it to end.
Again, so to me, when I zoom out and look at the drama of all this, when you really factor in, if you've been digging and doing a little bit of the research, if you've read Creature from Jekyll Island, if you understand the banking cartel and how massive this is, so much really does pinpoint on this case, because at least as I understand it from the outside looking in at arm's length, the SEC is sort of old guard. And they've been trying to, they're playing games to, like you said, to stall so that they can have a rival product that they can maintain control of, maintain the cartel. And they've kind of painted themselves in a corner because, as you said, if they do actually win, it changes everything. It creates such a mess for all these other industries, even outside of crypto, as I understand it. Like, oil companies own oil. Does that mean that that's a security? It's like, where does that principle break? It doesn't. So if that principle applies in Ripple and XRP, then it has to apply in these other places. And I don't think they really can afford to do that. So they painted themselves in a corner. And this, to me, is where the excitement and the potential opportunity lies because of what? So I want to ask you, as of right now, today is March 6, 2023. XRP is currently going for about 37 cents, give or take a penny. And let's talk about now the potential value of this asset and how you got to be on the XRP Buyback Committee and what these models of valuation are, because that's fascinating to me. So can you walk us through that?
Sure. So after Jimmy Valley noticed that there was something totally shady about this lawsuit, and that it was likely what is referred to as regulatory capture, where the government is sort of compromised, and they were engaging in a plan to force retail out. There's another side to this ETH Gate theory. We can't really prove that. Is that it's clear that the financial system is going to run on the XRP ledger, and the stability of the financial system is more guaranteed if retail holders are out. Because we are unpredictable, we buy and we sell, we get whims, we act like emotional creatures, move markets. So the theory with Jimmy's buyback was that if they want us out, they may do a forced buyback like gold in the 1930s, where they offer, say, hey, Peter, we're going to give you this really generous offer. We're going to give you $15 per token. And, it's trading at 45 cents, 50 cents. What a deal. You are going to be a bajillionaire considering those returns. Would you like to take me up on that offer? And they essentially lowball people who have no better understanding what it's for. So the idea with the buyback committee, the initial one, was to base it on what if all of the gold in the world was tokenized on the XRP ledger? How much would each token XRP have to be worth for that? And that was, I think, the 37.5. And we realized that, well, there's a lot more to this. There's this idea of utility in XRP where you can use it to send money back and forth. And then there's this idea of store of value where I can, if I make $100 million in profit, I've got to store that money somewhere. I could buy gold, I could buy dollars, I could buy Bitcoin. Well, what happens when all of a sudden everybody figures out XRP is a core part of the financial system and they start to pull XRP supply out of the market to store their money there? And so this is the competing forces between utility and store of value. So what we did, Jimmy invited me to be on the committee. I had written some threads on it. I'm totally not qualified to have been any of the model builders, so I didn't build any models. What my job was to help translate what the models were saying, kind of in infographics and threads and videos to the broader community. And we built 6 different ones. They all kind of tackle it from a different angle. There were 6 different model builders. Some were more from sort of the accounting finance world. One guy's like an evolutionary biologist. Some come from sort of the business corporate world. And I learned a couple of things. One is that the real value, like XRP will be insanely expensive, high priced, if all of the money in the world is tokenized on that blockchain. And all of the tokens that are exchanged are functionally a derivative of XRP. This is a debatable topic. When I first started this, I had no idea how emotional and heated people would be about it. I've gotten threats about this. I've been warned if I don't stop talking about this, my career is over, which I've like, how would you do that? What does that even mean?
You're decentralized, baby. Come on.
Yeah, I've gotten very nasty, mean comments on my YouTube videos and in Messenger or Twitter DMs. It's totally strange how angry people are about it, almost to the point where it looks like there's a paid controlled opposition group because they're just like off the charts how angry they are, calling me names and I'm a scammer. I'm like, I don't know what the scam is. All we did was build a bunch of math models. They also have a difficult time reading and understanding the original proposal because it's written in legal jargon. So they see things in there and don't know what they mean and they assume there's this sort of nefarious agenda. So it's been quite a bizarre experience, kind of toughened me up a little bit. Like you can now throw all sorts of shade at me and I'm just kind of like, whatever. Where when that first happened, that first weekend where it was like a whirlwind, it was upsetting. I was like, I don't know, this sucks.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we've learned, there's just one kind of key thing that I think the key takeaway is for me with the pricing is that XRP is unlike any other form of money we've ever had, in that it has this ability to be a very functional utility asset where we can quickly exchange value. And it also can be a store of value. And when these two things kick in, they compete with each other and they create what's called a virtuous cycle, which is like, imagine a tornado, how it starts out kind of small and it goes around. And as it gets bigger and bigger, it like accelerates and becomes huge. I mean, that's sort of what the virtuous cycle looks like. And these two competing forces will accelerate the price dramatically. And it's a lot like the compound effect. If you've ever studied like those savings account examples, like if you put, $1 in a savings account and you got a return, it looks like nothing is happening for a very, very long time if you've looked at compound returns. But then all of a sudden it like kicks in and the gains become exponential.
Yes, utility and essentially
store of value.
So we're at 37-ish cents today. What price point do you see XRP getting to?
That's a difficult question to answer because I think there's a long trajectory for the asset. Probably one of the model builders built a model over 100 years, a 99-year model. And the reason he did that is that global reserve currencies typically reign for about 100 years. So if you look at the value of XRP over the course of 100 years, it's going to probably have a peak. If you've ever read this Ray Dalio book about the changing world order thing.
Yes.
He has these bell curves in there, right? Where a currency has its peak. I don't know exactly when XRPs will be. It'll probably be decades from now. But I think in our lifetime, we will see mass adoption and incredible increases relative to where we are now. And it's going to have to do with adoption. So the more, like, first banks are going to start to use it to send money, and then businesses will use it to pay bills. And imagine when something like Amazon now doesn't want to pay credit card fees anymore. and they start to require blockchain payments. Now, whether all of those will be on XRP Ledger, I have no idea. The Stellar network is another possible one. There are quite a few, but once this sort of main scale adoption hits like the mass market, that's when I think we're going to see dramatic increases. There is another possibility, though, and that the financial system likes stability, and it is in their interest for there to be a very high valuation for XRP, simply because central banks around the world have been buying gold, like a lot of gold for quite a while. And the theory that I happen to believe is that they're doing that because they're going to intentionally crash the fiat system. There's going to be a bunch of banks that fail, probably in Europe initially. And the banks will fail because they look insolvent. It looks like they owe more money than they have in assets. But that's because the value of gold is quite low. It's been suppressed. What if they decide tomorrow, you know what, we're going to take gold from, $1,800 an ounce, and we're going to now say gold is $100,000 an ounce. All of these bank balance sheets are going to look a whole lot different. They're going to look very, very wealthy. And then they can issue digital assets off of that gold using the gold as the collateral. This is the idea between asset-backed currencies. And we have a new financial system. And at that moment, they can also revalue XRP and say, you know what, we don't want to have to send $1 billion using tokens that are priced 37 cents. I just need to have too many of them. So what if we just say that each XRP is worth $1 million, and then I only need to send a few of them when I send somebody $1 billion worth of value? So that we could see the banking system revalue XRP in the same way that the Plaza Accord in 1985 revalued currencies, and the Bretton Woods Agreement revalued gold. Like that kind of thing has happened in history. Nations and central banks have gotten together saying, in the interest of global financial stability, we're going to revalue this.
And they just snap their fingers and say it's now worth X? Is that?
I mean, they could. I mean, that's the thing. This is where I get into fights with some of the like blockchain Ripple developer people who are like, that is technically not possible. And I'm like, you don't understand. People can do whatever they want if they are in a position of power and authority. Yeah. And if the presidents of the G20 decided, you know what, we are going to now set the price at this particular point, and they have like arbitrage mechanisms in place to ensure that if the price were to deviate, that it corrects back. Like, this sort of water, I guess it's like the back of a toilet bowl, right? Like there's this sort of thing that keeps the water levels stable. I don't know if that's a good analogy at all, but this idea that the open markets, the automated market makers, can be used to regulate the arbitrage to keep it at a stable price. That is something that the global financial leaders could absolutely do. Will they? I don't know. What will the price be? I don't know. So one of the reasons we built those models and are writing a paper on it is maybe they'll want our opinion. Although Jimmy, when he first put the buyback proposal together, stated that he thinks that those banks have agreed a long time ago about what that price would be, because they wouldn't have made their deal with each other without first establishing the price.
Going back to your personal journey, it's been really cool to see that you've gone from, wait, what is Bitcoin, to now you're hanging out with Jimmy Valley. And explain who Jimmy Valley is, but not everybody knows who he is.
Sure. So he was a corporate securities attorney for like 20 years, did mostly like mergers and acquisition type of stuff, not a world that I knew much about. And he kind of discovered this problem with ETH Gate. And he did what he knows how to do, which is to put together a deal to try to address the problem. In the similar way that Elon Musk bought Twitter, using this very public strategy of creating documents, putting out offers, challenging the shareholders, and sort of duking this out in the public square for all of us to watch. Jimmy modeled the XRP buyback off of that. Funny thing is, he did not coin that label. He just had like the XRP terms and conditions, or some kind of very lawyerly sounding name. But people who didn't really know what to call it, someone in the community started referring to it as the XRP buyback proposal. And that name just kind of stuck. And it's sort of, he wrote this letter like in 2021, didn't go anywhere. I mean, he basically made an offer to the Fed. Hey, we know what you're doing. We think you're trying to get retail out. I'm trying to call you out on it. So you can make me go away if you buy it from all of us for 37.5 a token, which they didn't respond. I got a lot of attention, and people misinterpreted that as Jimmy saying that like the Fed is going to buy our tokens, which no, they didn't even reply to it. And at that time, he didn't really know a whole lot about the ETH Gate thing. So a year later, ETH Gate drama and details have emerged, and it kind of just makes a lot of people really angry that there's just this incredible corruption within our financial system, that he decided to reinvigorate it and create like a 2.0 version. And he called it the Confidential Committee, which really just meant that you can be on this committee and we won't disclose your participation in case that would get you in trouble with your job or something. There's people in investment banks and different professions on the committee who don't want their participation to be public knowledge. But people misinterpreted that as like it's a secret committee, like some sort of secret society. And how do we know it exists if it's a secret? But it really just meant your participation would be confidential. And a new version of the terms was drafted. It has not been completed. The model valuations are sort of intended to accompany it. But, I don't really know where it's going to go. I'm certainly not banking on any buyback like money coming ever. Like the probability of it succeeding statistically is quite low. But it's been a fascinating journey to sort of learn how these things are valued and to see how traumatized the XRP community has been by this lawsuit and by what we also think is paid marketing FUD around Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin people hate XRP for reasons that don't make a whole lot of sense. And there's been a lot of like antagonism and sort of angry labels, like that you would think that this crypto community could be kind of unified and that we all want to move to this world of sound money and a fair system for all of us where it's not just driven by this debt that's printed out of nothing. But the cartel, one thing that they do, if you read this book, is they love to divide and conquer, and they get us to fight with each other, and they're constantly splitting us up into two halves, left, right, liberal, conservative. And they've split up the crypto markets as well to keep us fighting with each other instead of unified against the banking cartel.
Is the fight really around the idea that Bitcoin is decentralized, it's the people's money, versus an XRP, which is in bed with essentially the cartel and the big institutional players that the decentralists want to keep at least at arm's length?
Well, there's a bit of hypocrisy there in that we don't really know who Satoshi Nakamoto is, right? For all we know, Satoshi Nakamoto could be a couple of banking people, right?
Right.
Or Satoshi Nakamoto could be a North Korean hacker. And the Bitcoin maxis, when I asked them about this, they deem it irrelevant. The identity of Satoshi Nakamoto is not relevant. What is bizarre is that Congress, in their discussions around crypto and money laundering, and Elizabeth Warren is notorious for just pointing at the wrong things, like discussing the irrelevant topics, they never seem to make a big deal about who Satoshi is. And there's a video from a couple of years ago where a woman in Homeland Security discusses on a public stage that a person on her team went out to California to meet with the 4 Satoshis, that went out to meet with Satoshi and had this meeting and found out there was 4 of them, and that asked why they created it and what the story was. And there's people who have theories that the identity of those 4 people tie back to companies like PayPal and Google and other California fintechs that will benefit greatly from a new blockchain-based financial system. But here's the thing, let's go back to this securities issue, right? If there's no issuer of the token, who do you sue for a securities violation?
Right.
So when you have this anonymous, mysterious creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, it's given this illusion that Bitcoin wasn't actually created by a central entity, which it very well could have been.
As far as the valuation for XRP goes, again, for the layman person who might be listening to this, who possibly a lot of this is even already going over their head, let's just get it down to brass tacks for a second. Okay. They might be looking at XRP as if it's just like any other digital asset. It's a crapshoot. I'm going to throw my money at it. But really, there's been a massive adoption of XRP already. I mean, we're seeing, are we not seeing institutions, even countries that are now utilizing XRP? Who's adopted it already? And what kind of forward momentum do you see with it as a actual viable utility and solution for massive money transfer?
So Ripple's had a lot of success gaining adoption with banks and institutions outside of the US. The price is absolutely suppressed, in my opinion, because businesses are scared to use it in the US because they don't want to get in trouble for holding a security and not being able to sell it because they're not a licensed security seller, right? Also, projects that would likely build on the XRP ledger have not. They've gone to another blockchain because they don't want to invest in this blockchain, buy all this XRP to support the payments in their business, and then find out it's a security. So I can't tell you what the price is going to be, but I can tell you that the natural price is way higher than what it is due to the lawsuit suppressing it.
Because of that lawsuit, XRP has been taken off all of U.S. exchanges, so retail buyers have a hard time getting hold of it. For those that are interested in maybe buying some, where would you recommend that they go to buy it?
The easiest place to buy it is on Uphold. They have a very user-friendly app that you can go and connect directly to your bank. I actually buy it on a exchange called MEXC Global. It's a more complicated market maker type thing, so there's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's easy for me to buy it there and then store it in my Ledger cold wallet away from anyone's prying hands.
Right. Well, let's say either for a forced buyback or potentially even just like airdrops and stuff like that. Just do you have to have your assets on a public exchange like that, or could you have them on a cold wallet and still get the airdrops and verification of buyback? Does that make sense? So
airdrops are kind of separate. Those aren't real. I mean, there's some stuff in the proposal around airdrops, which is about like Flare and Spark, where if you held XRP, you could be given airdropped other things. And the airdrop, usually they take a snapshot of the ledger and all the wallet addresses that hold an asset. And whether or not that address is a cold wallet address or a hot wallet, I don't think that matters at all. Now, in terms of the buyback, first of all, there is no agreement now, so no one can do anything now regarding the buyback. A proposal's been written, a new version's been drafted, it has not been sent. So this idea that like Jimmy has asked people to send their XRP or for private keys is totally nonsense and factually inaccurate. There is no actual active deal. There's an idea of one. Now, if that were to happen, then people who wanted to participate could kind of pool their XRP together and sell it to whoever the buyer is, which originally was going to be the Fed, but now we have this sort of global thing. It could be the IMF, it could be the World Bank. Like, we don't know necessarily who really is in charge of this whole financial system. One of the models did clearly indicate, though, with mathematical precision, the risk to the financial system if a lot of retail holders have XRP and the price pumps to, let's just even say $100. Lots of retail people, and I'm sure I would probably be tempted, will see 40 cents to $100 and be like, cha-ching, and cash out. And it could cause the price to drop a lot. And what happens is, remember I said these banks might be revaluing their gold assets and revaluing XRP. Well, what happens if a country has taken out a loan and used XRP as collateral for the loan, and then these retail people come along and get all giddy that the price is up and they sell and it causes the price to drop? Now you've got nations getting margin called on these loans. Like it creates a lot of problems for the financial system if you have emotional retail holders having a bunch. So this is why it was the first time I really truly believe like the financial institutions would like to buy this back from us, not because they care about us making money or not making money. They want to protect the stability of their own system. Yeah. And we are unpredictable. So I don't even know if the buyback would be necessary, because if the thing got to $15, you know what a huge percentage of people have been holding for 2 years, they'd be like, screw this, I'm out. And a majority of people would be done. And the concern of the banks might go away at that point.
I mean, it wouldn't be a horrible return. I mean, if that's a worst case scenario, that's not a bad place to be in.
Here's the risk, though. You sell it for what, though?
I know.
Your dollars?
I know. And then what? Where do you put those?
That's why one of the things in the proposal, which is quite a controversial thing, is that if there were a deal and we were to sell our XRP to like the IMF or whatever, we don't want to get paid in fiat. Like we want to get paid in either an asset-backed currency or in an ESDR, which is like the IMF's wholesale reserve currency. That way we don't have to be worried about inflation basically stealing that wealth.
Is that something you can invest that a retail buyer can buy?
No, not at all. So that sort of introduces another complication, which is like, all right, well, who gets to own an ESDR? Well, you have to be like a country or a central bank. All right, well, how do you become a country? And this is where this state sovereign national thing has come up, that you can actually decide to leave the U.S. corporate, because, and then we find out that the U.S. is not a country, it's a corporation. This is another rabbit hole. So you can decide to declare your sovereignty. And if you do that, can you be considered an institution that could hold an ESDR? So none of this is fully baked. It's a very fascinating topic. And the more you like ask these questions, you're like, okay, now what? I get to be a country. That means nobody can charge me taxes. I don't have to pay in this debt slavery system that the US corporation has going. It would be kind of cool. When I get to that point, it starts to scare me because I'm like, wait a minute, if I give up my citizenship, you can issue your own passports.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear of Terramar? I don't know if we're allowed to talk about this topic on your show.
Well, let's find out.
Remember the guy in the Caribbean who had an island?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that guy.
And his death is suspicious. Well, he had this friend, right, who's also in jail. And the two of them created this oceanic project called Terramar. And they declared,
my gosh, yes, I do remember.
They declared sovereignty. It was like its own independent nation out floating in the ocean. And they had their own passports issued. So like, you can do it. You can make your own country and have your own passport. And then the idea was, all right, now we could charter our own bank in our own country and hold ESDRs in our banks reserves or whatever.
One of the things that you've done, you have such a gift for explaining these complex topics. Now, we've gotten fairly technical today. I encourage any of my listeners to go listen to Molly's stuff because you slow it down. We're excited today, and we're talking about some things that are a little bit beyond 101 level. But Molly, you've done an incredible job of using metaphors and using analogies to explain these complex topics for people. One of the things that you've done to help me sort of walk back me from the ledge, so to speak, is around central bank digital currencies. Because there was a time there, I think actually when we spoke on our first podcast call, I think we were both of the mindset that this was like to be avoided at all costs. This is going to be a digital slavery. You've kind of changed your opinion on that. Would you be willing to share your mindset of how you got there?
I was very much in this sort of fearful mode of this, World Economic Forum, Agenda 2030, that they were going to try to come and enslave us all. And then I actually joined this community around Tom Luongo, who's an economist and geopolitical guy. And there's a very international crowd in there, including one very sharp guy who lives in China. And I was asking all these questions about the Chinese central bank digital currency and their social credit scores, because we have been led to believe that like this system is in place in China and is being used to kind of oppress Chinese people. And he was like, it's made up. Like this social credit score system in China tied to central bank digital currency does not exist. I'm like, what are you talking about? I've read all these articles. And he's like, all right. And we went through the articles that have very clickbaity headline, and then we actually read them, and it doesn't exist. There's parts of it. There's private companies like a Facebook equivalent who has scores people. Our Facebook scores us. And if I got kicked off Facebook for a month for posting a meme, like we have a social credit system in social media, but they can't connect it to the banks. There's like logistical problems. First of all, governments are never good at managing massive data projects. Remember Obamacare? What a mess that was.
It's a disaster.
Imagine the logistics of billions of people in China being managed from one central database that connects to all these other databases in real time to turn your access on and off. Now they have these separate things. They have like the COVID phone passport thing where they can turn that on and off, but to connect it to the money and to social credit, he said it doesn't exist. And we read the articles in detail. So the question was, why do they want us to think that? This is where propaganda comes in. If we already believe that it's a done deal, then we kind of resign to the fact that like, oh, well, we tried. We'll just have to grin and bear it. But it doesn't exist in China. The Europeans who are pushing it are not technology people. They're, do you think Klaus Schwab can build like a database of that sort? There was also, remember you and I were in this Telegram with a guy the Gideon guy who created all sorts of fear that this database thing was built in the US and that it was going to happen here, the sovereign thing where we all had these scores. When I started to ask a lot of questions about that, like the logistics of managing something like that are incredible. Now, do I think DARPA and the NSA could build something like that? Probably, but it would, first of all, CBDC in the US would devastate commercial banks. We just went over the ETH Gate scandal. The commercial banks in the United States are incredibly powerful. We'll just even use JP Morgan as an example. If CBDCs were issued in the purest form where the money goes directly from the Fed to the people, what do commercial banks do? Like they're cut out of the flow of money. They're no longer the ones who are going to be issuing loans and credit cards, like if your money comes directly from the central bank. So why would they support that? They would be signing their own death warrant. Now, I think we will see a wholesale CBDC in the US. I think we already have one, which is when the Fed issues a digital currency to a bank. They do that right now with reserves. Whether they do that reserves on a central ledger or they use a blockchain ledger, like, we don't care. That doesn't affect us at all. And then I think in the US, we will see stable coins be issued by commercial banks. They're probably all going to be like private label versions of Circle USDC. And that will be what's considered the CBDC, where it originates with the central bank. It is based on some kind of blockchain digital asset thing, but the logistics of tying all of that to this dystopian thing about like Facebook and Twitter and your health stuff, I mean, it would be like Obamacare times 100. And that was such a mess that, I mean, is Obamacare even still a thing? I feel like it got kind of just abandoned at some point.
Just went away. It did. The famous book, Art of War, Sun Tzu's book, talked about if you're big, present small. If you're small, present big. And is it possible that the CCP has presented itself as massive when we know, if you just look a little bit under the hood, man, they have massive economic problems. They have massive demographic problems. They have, the other thing that I think has been helpful in your explanation of all this is that corruption, cartels are decentralized. There's different players that are vying for power and control. And in a way, that's a bit of a check and balance to where there's not just this one global entity, that one decision maker that's going to snap their fingers and make it all happen. There's other people that are saying, no, I want in. I want to be part of the corruption. I want to be part of it. Or not even as, nefarious as that. It's like, it's just profit. And things are massively changing. There's different players, which has helped me get a little bit more probably balanced in that whole perspective. Because what do I really know, to be honest?
I think that I have an unpopular opinion on China. I think we have been fed a lot of propaganda about China, and that China is not really an enemy of the American people at all. I think China has a deep state, just like the United States does.
Yep.
I think China has a big bone to pick with Britain, who has colonized all parts of the world and has a very dark history with organized crime and cartels. And the MI6 type deep state has infiltrated parts of China and created their own network of organized crime that would love war, because war is profitable for the cartel. This guy I know who sort of awakened me to the fact there is no sort of CBDC social credit system in China also said that the Chinese Communist Party they have a joke in China that it's communist in name only, that they're very capitalist. I mean, business is booming in China. Like, there's incredible expansion. Home ownership is like, they're trying to get everybody to buy a house, which has led to this oversupply of things. It's not exactly this oppressive communist state that we think of, like almost North Korea, like where, the state owns everything. I think we're being played by the European Davos cartel. They want us to fight with China so we can beat each other up and then leave Europeans to be the victors who kind of take over the one world government stuff.
That's been one of the most fascinating awakenings, I think, that I personally have gone through in the last few years, is just to begin to fragment different belief systems and start to break them apart and realize, is it all bad? No. Is it all good? No. Okay, well, where is the good and the bad within it? And I think a lot of Americans have awoken to the fact that, not everybody on our team is a good guy. And so therefore, is it possible that everybody on what we, like you were saying, that we presumed to was a bad guy, maybe not all of them are bad guys. Maybe there's some good guys over there. And so, when you start to lift up the hood and you start to draw the connections between the corporations and these different deep state members, you realize, that they have opposition in their own home countries, in which, and in my opinion, would be more of an ally to just common, decent people that are trying to, live their lives and be profitable, et cetera. It's been a fascinating awakening. When you look at all of this, what are you most excited about?
I think it's going to be pretty cool to see how new payment models introduce business opportunities via this next version of the internet. So for example, 20 years ago when the internet first started, if I had told you that one day you're going to have this phone with all these apps and you can do things like order food and it just comes and you don't even have to talk to anybody. You can order a taxi and there's like a little map on it. It's going to show you exactly when the car is going to arrive. You never have to even swipe a credit card. It's just all in your phone. You'd be like, what? That sounds like magic, right? the same level of innovation is going to happen when the friction around payments is removed. So for example, right now, if you joined like a monthly membership for something, right? You either pay in advance and then you have to trust that that service is going to be delivered to you, or you wait and pay at the end of the month, but then that service has to trust that you're actually going to pay them, right? What if we're going to move to these streaming payment models where you just are paying like every hour, like a couple of cents. These very small transactions will totally revolutionize how you rent a hotel room, how you hire painters to come to your house. All these things where we have estimates could go away if you're just going to literally be billed for the amount of time or usage. Think about your phone bill every month. What if you're just billed on the usage? There's a lot of like bloat in the way businesses are structured right now because of logistics. Like if I do marketing consulting, like if I charge you a monthly retainer, again, that whole thing, like I bill you once a month. What if I just sort of bill you continuously? It's going to open up all of these new and neat different ways for businesses to structure and organize. I'm very excited for that. I think that's going to be pretty cool to watch.
Are there specific projects that you're excited about as well that you're following that we haven't talked about today?
Yeah. So I do a lot of content creation, and one of the frustrating things about this internet era is that it's ad supported. And my career before I got into all this stuff, before I even started coaching, was I worked in market research around advertising. And I don't really want to work for advertisers anymore. I know the conflict that happens between somebody who wants to talk about topics and the issue with the advertiser. I dealt with this with pharmaceutical industry clients where you can't be fully honest. So that's a problem to me with the ad model, is that who do you work for? Do you work for the people who you're creating the content for, or do you work for the advertiser? Mm-hmm. That seems like it's no big deal until one day it is a problem and it is a conflict. So I'm excited for there to be new business models around content. This idea of like tipping, like it's one of the things I like about locals, is that if you don't want to join for $10 a month, you can just buy a bunch of these tokens and just tip me 10 coins, like 20 cents on each article. And if you had a big community with a lot of people can support you, almost like buskers busking like on a street where you put a couple quarters into like the guitar case. It's just going to revolutionize the relationship between content creators and their fans. Think about music, right? All music goes through these central entities of like Apple iTunes or the record producers. Well, what if I have this way where I just make music and you kind of just tip me and support me in a new revolutionary way where these small micropayments are now feasible? Because right now, Visa does not want us running like 10-cent transactions, right? It's just not in the interest of credit card companies to have these very small transactions. So those business models around supporting artists, writers, musicians, content creators, I think that's going to be super cool. And I personally want to see us move away from, and I don't have a problem with advertisers. I just don't want to be a content creator with this ethical dilemma of who do I work for? I'd rather just be able to have the relationship with the readers or viewers.
Do you anticipate a black swan event that's going to trigger the financial switch, or do you see it happening in a relatively peaceful way?
Yeah, no, by definition, you're not supposed to be able to predict black swan event, right? They're supposed to be,
of course,
you can imagine, but I think there will be something that triggers a bunch of banking bail-ins in Europe, and that's what resets the gold valuation. I don't know if it's going to be something like a war, like a physical thing. There's been chatter that it could, the World Economic Forum likes to warn us about things, and they've been warning about like cyber attacks and some sort of like the power goes out in a grid attack. So that could be it. Literally the power goes out globally for a week, which would be insane in most places. And they're like, hey, well, while we're here, while it's down, why don't we just reboot in the new system? I mean, that's sort of the Great Reset could literally just simply mean we're going to actually reset the whole thing.
Yeah.
Literally like the computer that you plug and unplug.
Yeah. Crazy to think about. Do you see, how much longer do you see the world using the dollar? There's a lot of talk right now about de-dollarization and the movements that other countries are making. And of course, the central banks with gold. Gold's now a tier 1 asset. How much life is there left in the dollar?
This is a subject of great debate and controversy. I think the dollar is tied up in so many things like long-term bonds and treasuries, that derivative products, that it won't just like go away one day. I think it's going to be one of these things where we're going to have a period where lots of stuff is used, kind of what we saw when the British pound went out and the dollar came in. It's not like everybody stopped using pounds, right? I mean, you can still use it. It just stopped being the global dominant currency. Mm-hmm. So I think, we could probably use dollars at the local store for a while. The issue will be whether or not the CBDC in the US looks like a dollar. So if I had USDC on my phone, do I consider that dollars? Like when we're talking about it and when I'm going to pay at the grocery store, if I'm paying with USDC, in my mind, is that just a new digital form of a dollar? Yeah. If so, then the dollar has quite a shelf life. Now, whether this is the other exciting thing that kind of ties into this, like Nasara moving to asset-backed currencies. If the US takes all of our gold and uses it to back a US digital dollar, the fiat dollar that we are used to could actually go away pretty quickly, because who wants to hold that when you could hold the one that's backed by gold? So there would be, I think, a pretty quick redemption process for you to swap the old one for the new one. There is chatter in Europe and UK about how that would work. They might not give you one-to-one, or they might not let you exchange all of it. We'll see how that plays out. So to me, I think I want the fiat dollar to go away, and I think it's going to go away, but I think the brand, the dollar will exist in a new format that was backed by gold, in my opinion.
It's pretty interesting just to see how much, we're still talking about XRP and the explosion of value, but we're still defining it in terms of dollars. Like what happens if there is no dollar? How do you're going to be thinking of buying a house with half an XRP or something? Like we just mentally are so ingrained to think of value in terms of dollars.
That's when I think the shift will happen to the next reserve currency, is when we start to think in that currency. Now, as Americans, we're spoiled. Like if you lived in Zimbabwe, you would probably think in multiple currencies. Or if you even just lived in Europe, some things are priced in euros and some things you just think in dollars. Like I only think in dollars. The rest of the world, I think, it won't be that big of a deal for them to now think in a new currency. For us, it will be, which is why I think the US is going last. There is another theory that the SCC lawsuit is simply theater and that everybody's in on it, and that they are doing that to hold the US innovation back, to give the rest of the world a chance to catch up innovation-wise. And that's why a lot of these blockchain projects are happening outside the US, to create this level playing field where the US doesn't just dominate yet again. Other countries have the opportunity to build businesses and infrastructures and compete globally with the United States. And that's why the US will turn on the blockchain money last.
So fascinating. Well, this might be a good place to just tie it up in a nice bow, because you do what you do very well, which is kind of explain these things. For those that are interested in joining your community and hearing more about your perspectives, and I highly encourage it, because you are one of those people that just really helps you think about things. You provide a perspective that doesn't just take these, broader narratives as face value. You do the digging and the research, and it's really, really helpful to kind of think through these things in a different way. It's changing thought, which I think is very fascinating. Where can somebody go to get into your community?
Sure. I got a couple things going on. So the place I'm probably most prolific is on Twitter, Molly Elmore 22. I also have a community on Locals that you're a member of, twostepsahead.locals.com. And I have a new consultancy that actually started with Jimmy Valley and a third guy named Mark Connolly, where we are supporting businesses as they prepare to transition to the blockchain. Because, I think about this stuff all day long, but it's going to affect the business world a lot.
Big time.
And many people will be caught off guard. So that's called Val Hill Advisors. We've got a couple of free stuff on our website, valhilladvisors.io. We have a Twitter account at Val Hill Advisors to follow as well.
Oh, that's fascinating. I'm going to have to look into that. How exciting. Wow. Yeah. How much are things changing right now, personally and collectively? And
I have this weird thing that time has been strange for me lately. Things that feel like they were a really long time ago were 2 months ago. That was 2 months ago, seriously, it feels like a year ago. So I no longer have this accurate perception of time.
I mean, pre-COVID, I can't even really remember what that was like, to be honest, anymore.
Yeah,
I don't even.
I know.
Oh, I meant to ask you real quick before we wrap up. Was it you that told me that maybe XRP was even created by, a non-human entity? I love when you drop those kind of things, by the way.
There's some people who believe that it is not of this world, which I'm fascinated by. And that's where there's this other thing we didn't quite get into, but this Riddler community, where there's this sort of connections with the occult, which some people think the occult are really alien beings that are communicating with people,
lizard people and whatnot.
And that ties into this thing with who created XRP. So maybe we'll have to save that whole XRP. I do have a video on XRP and the cult at Clever Hummingbird YouTube channel if you want to dig into that interesting, fascinating rabbit hole.
It always makes for great dinner conversation. I find this to be way more interesting than your standard Wall Street chat. So thank you for that at the very least. Molly, this has been an awesome conversation. Sorry about the disruption there halfway through, but thank you again for your time, and hope to have you on again once we know whether or not lizard people are behind this or not. We'll have another podcast.
Be happy to come back.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks again, Molly.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wired for Impact. If you're interested in creating and expanding your impact, be sure to visit us online at impactnow.com.